Hello guys, welcome back to our channel, Epic Explorer. Today we will be presenting you the richest countries in the world. What do people think when they think about the world's richest countries? And what comes to mind when they think about the world's smallest countries? Many people would probably be surprised to find that many of the planet's wealthiest nations are also among the tiniest. 10. San Marino. Tiny San Marino is the oldest republic in Europe, and the fifth smallest country on the map. It may have only 34,000 citizens, but it is among the wealthiest citizenry in the world. It helps that income tax rates are very low, at about one-third of the EU average. Nonetheless, San Marino is working towards harmonizing its fiscal laws and regulations with those of the European Union, EU, and international standards. The tiny nation showed remarkable resilience during the pandemic, and amid tight monetary conditions and the energy crisis, with its tourism industry and manufacturing sector turning especially strong performances. Did we say that the wealthiest countries are also the smallest? That is not the case, of course, with the United States, which first entered the top 10 list in 2020, after hovering just beyond 10th place for the better part of the past 2 decades. America's entry and continuing presence in the top 10 are due to falling energy prices and pandemic-driven state spending. Falling energy prices pushed petroleum-based economies like Qatar, Norway and the United Arab Emirates down several rankings, while Brunei fell out of the top 10 entirely. Meanwhile, the emergency surge in government spending on stimulus checks, increased food stamp benefits, and expanded Medicaid enrollment boosted aggregate demand significantly. As a result, the U.S. had its shortest recession on record in early 2020, lasting only 2 months. Since the discovery of large offshore reserves in the late 1960s, Norway's economic engine has been fueled by oil. As Western Europe's top petroleum producer, the country has benefited for decades from rising prices. Until it didn't. Prices crashed at the beginning of 2020, then the global pandemic ensued, and the krone was sent into freefall. In the second quarter of that year, Norwegian GDP fell by 6.3%, the biggest decline in half a century and possibly since World War II. When it comes to any unforeseen economic problem, Norwegians can always count on their 1.3 trillion sovereign wealth fund, the world's largest. But unlike many other rich nations, Norway's high per capita GDP figures are a reasonably accurate reflection of the average person's economic well-being. The country has amongst the smallest income inequality gaps in the world. 7. Switzerland. White chocolate, the bobsleigh, the Swiss Army knife, the computer mouse, the immersion blender, Velcro, and LSD are just some of the noteworthy inventions brought to the world by Switzerland. This country of about 8.7 million people owes much of its wealth to banking and insurance services, to tourism, and to the export of pharmaceuticals products, gems, precious metals, precision instruments, think watches, and machinery, medical apparatuses and computers. According to the 2022 Global Wealth Report by Credit Suisse, Switzerland once again came out on top when it comes the mean average wealth per adult at a whopping $700,000. Furthermore, roughly 1 adult in 6 owns assets worth more than $1 million. Is it really a surprise that Switzerland has the highest density of millionaires in the world? Approximately 74% of Swiss GDP is generated by the services sector and 25% by industry. The agricultural sector contributes less than 1%. The EU is Switzerland's main trading partner. Around 66% of Swiss imports are from the EU, while 43% of Swiss exports are to EU countries. The economy of Switzerland is one of the world's most advanced and highly developed mixed economy. Particularly the Swiss banking industry and tourism is the main source of income generation. 6. United Arab Emirates. Agriculture, fishing and trading pearls. These used to be the economic mainstays of this Persian Gulf nation. Then oil was discovered in the 1950s and everything changed. Today, the United Arab Emirates, UAE, highly cosmopolitan population enjoys considerable wealth. Traditional Islamic architecture mixes with glitzy shopping centers and workers come from all over the world lured by tax-free salaries and year-round sunshine. Tourism has played a large part in the success of the UAE's economic diversification. The UAE's world-class airlines, including Etihad and Emirates, as well as constant upgrading of aviation infrastructure, have played a major role in the advance of the tourism industry and are key contributors to the economy. 5. Macau. Just a few years ago, many were betting that the Las Vegas of Asia was on its way to becoming the richest nation in the world. Formerly a colony of the Portuguese Empire, the gaming industry was liberalized in 2001. This special administrative region of the People's Republic of China has seen its wealth growing at an astounding pace. With a population of about 700,000, and more than 40 casinos spread over a territory of about 30 square kilometers. This narrow peninsula just south of Hong Kong became a money-making machine. Tourism and gambling. Tourism is the backbone of Macau's economy, and much of it geared towards gambling, which was legalized in the 19th century and has since been the linchpin of the economy and an important source of revenue for the government. So these two departments has major effect in Macau's wealth. 4. Qatar. A century ago in 1922, Qatar was a small Gulf country with less than 12,000 kilometers of uninhabitable land. It had a population of 3 million, with most of its residents being nomadic immigrants from the boundless deserts of the Arabian Peninsula. Today, Qatar is one of the richest countries in the world, thanks to oil and natural gas. In 1939, Qatar's first oil deposit was discovered on its west coast, and the economy began to change dramatically since then. The growth of the oil industry created vast opportunities, and so did its rapid changes and modernization. The stream of foreign workers also increased, as more investors started flocking to Qatar. By 1970, the population grew from less than 25,000 to over 100,000, with a gross domestic product, GDP, of over 300 million. That's when the country became an independent nation, after having been under British rule since 1916. The growth of the oil industry created vast opportunities, and so did its rapid changes and modernization. The stream of foreign workers also increased, as more investors started flocking to Qatar. By 1970, the population grew from less than 25,000 to over 100,000, with a gross domestic product, GDP, of over 300 million. That's when the country became an independent nation, after having been under British rule since 1916. Lee Kuan Yew, the man who founded modern day, led that economic transformation. One of the most influential leaders of the 20th century, Lee was an autocrat whose tiny island state became one of the richest places in the world, and a role model for other governments in Asia and beyond. Singapore has little land and no natural resources. But after its independence in 1965, the former British colony was transformed into a major manufacturing and financial centre. The late conservative economist Milton Friedman described Singapore as an example of how to do development right. 2. Luxembourg. You can visit Luxembourg for its castles and beautiful countryside, its cultural festivals or gastronomic specialties. Or you could just set up an offshore account through one of its banks and never set foot in the country again. Doing so would be a pity. Situated at the very heart of Europe, this nation of close to 650,000 has plenty to offer, both to tourists and citizens. Luxembourg uses a large share of its wealth to deliver better housing, healthcare and education to its people, who by far enjoy the highest standard of living in the Eurozone. The small European nation of Luxembourg is the world's last remaining Grand Duchy, meaning its ruling monarch is a duke rather than a king, But this isn't the only thing to make the country unique. With a GDP per capita of over 140,000, which is over 50,000 more than the next runner-up, Luxembourg is in among the richest countries of the world. 1. Ireland. It has a smaller population than New York. But still, it has become a go-to place for international businesses like Apple and Microsoft, which place the European headquarters on this tiny island. Ireland was not always this rich. The Irish potato famine was a period of mass starvation and disease in Ireland from 1845 to 1849. 1 million people died of famine, and more than 1 million fled the country. It significantly declined its population. Per capita, Ireland is now considered one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and the most affluent in Europe behind Luxembourg. As per the data, Ireland is still better than other countries in Europe. Its per capita income is higher than the rest of the developed countries in Europe. If you like the video, please consider subscribing the channel.